Welcome to Sexpertease. I'm your host and favorite sexpert, the Erica Rivera. So tonight I am actually recording from Kobe, Japan. Really excited to be here. And we're going to be talking about what emotional maturity actually looks like in dating. It's a phrase that we hear all the time, but emotional maturity isn't simply something people have because they've reached a certain age or have been through a few relationships. In reality, emotional maturity has very little to do with birthdays or, you know, anything as far as like aging is concerned. It has more to do with behavior. So many people, they mistake confidence, success, charm, or even good communication skills for emotional maturity. Someone can be attractive, charismatic, financially successful, and still struggle to take accountability or have the ability to regulate their emotions or maintain healthy relationships. On the other hand, someone might be quiet, reserved, and demonstrate incredible emotional maturity through the way that they communicate, the way that they respect boundaries, and navigate conflict. Maturity reveals itself over time, especially when life becomes uncomfortable. So, throughout tonight's episode, we're going to explore the behaviors that truly define emotional maturity in dating and relationships. We'll discuss emotional regulation, accountability, communication, of course, consistency, boundaries, and a whole lot more. My hope is that by the end of this conversation, you'll have a clearer understanding of what healthy emotional maturity actually looks like, not only in the people you date, but within yourself as well. Now, before we dive into my next slide, I do have a little bit of a cough, so my voice may sound different. It's a little raspy. Um, yeah, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Some people may like it, but fair warning before we continue. So, emotional maturity defined, right? Let's begin by defining emotional maturity. At its core, emotional maturity starts with self awareness. That means recognizing your own emotions, understanding your behavioral patterns, and taking the time to reflect instead of automatically reacting. Emotional mature people are not perfect by any means, but they are willing to examine themselves honestly and continue learning about who they are. The second part of emotional maturity is emotional regulation. This doesn't mean ignoring your emotions or pretending that everything's okay. It means allowing yourself to experience difficult emotions without letting those emotions completely control your behavior. So basically, not crashing out, as they say. You can feel hurt without becoming cruel. You can feel frustrated without becoming disrespectful. And you can feel disappointed without immediately giving up on the relationship. Finally, emotional maturity requires accountability. Healthy relationships depend on people who can acknowledge the impact of their actions, apologize sincerely when it's necessary, and make an effort to grow from their mistakes rather than focusing only on what someone else did wrong. Emotionally mature people are willing to ask themselves, what was my role in this situation and what can I learn from it? That mindset creates stronger relationships because growth becomes more important than protecting your ego. Emotional regulation is one of the clearest signs of emotional maturity because every relationship will eventually bring moments of stress, disappointment, insecurity, or conflict. The question isn't whether you'll experience difficult emotions, it's how you respond when they happen. Emotionally mature people understand that emotions are normal, but they don't allow every feeling to dictate their next decision. Someone who struggles with emotional regulation may react impulsively. They might lash out, shut down, ghost, send an angry text, or expect their partner to manage their emotions for them. Those reactions usually create even more problems because the focus shifts away from solving the issue and toward repairing the damage caused by the reaction itself. Emotional regulation creates space between what you feel and how you choose to respond. One of the healthiest things that you can say in a relationship is, I need a moment before we continue this conversation. That in itself is not avoidance, it's self-awareness. Taking a pause allows your emotions to basically settle so you can communicate more thoughtfully instead of reactively. Healthy relationships aren't built by people who never get upset. They're built by people who learn how to navigate difficult emotions with respect and intention. Another hallmark of emotional maturity is accountability. Accountability means taking ownership of your behavior without immediately becoming defensive or looking for someone else to blame. It's recognizing that your intentions and your impact are not always the same and that both deserve attention. Even when you didn't mean to hurt someone, their experience still matters. A sincere apology goes beyond simply saying, I'm sorry. Let me repeat that. It goes beyond just saying, I'm sorry. There are so many people that say those words and they feel like that's enough. But it's not. It includes acknowledging what happened, understanding how your actions affected the other person, and demonstrating a genuine willingness to do better moving forward. Without changed behavior, apologies eventually lose their meaning. I'm sure quite a few of us can relate, or probably want to repeat that very phrase to someone we know right now. Emotional maturity is reflected not only in recognizing mistakes, but also in learning from them. Accountability also builds trust because it creates emotional safety. When both people know that they can admit mistakes without the relationship immediately falling apart, honesty becomes so much easier as long as you both know that you can admit to mistakes without the relationship immediately falling apart. Instead of protecting their ego, emotionally mature people focus on protecting the relationship. They understand that growth isn't about never making mistakes. It's about responding to those mistakes with humility, honesty, and a commitment to improve. Clear communication, and as you know, for me, communication is lubrication. I still want to put that on a t-shirt. I do. Clear communication is another defining characteristic of emotional maturity. Mature people don't expect their partners to read their minds, guess their needs, or interpret vague hints. They understand that healthy relationships require honesty, even when honesty feels very uncomfortable. Communicating directly prevents misunderstandings before they have a chance to grow into larger problems. Being direct doesn't mean being harsh. Sometimes people confuse honesty with brutality, believing that saying whatever comes to mind is a sign of authenticity. In reality, emotionally mature conversation balances honesty with compassion. So it allows you to express your needs, feelings, and your concerns while still respecting the dignity of the person that you're speaking to. When communication is unclear, people often begin filling in the blanks themselves. Assumptions replace facts, overthinking replaces clarity, and small misunderstandings quickly become much larger conflicts. Mature communication reduces unnecessary confusion because both people understand what's actually being said rather than guessing what the other person might mean. Consistency. So consistency is another good one. Consistency is one of the most overlooked signs of emotional maturity. It's easy to show up during exciting moments, right? Or when everything is going well. This may actually also go for friendships and not just relationships, but the real test is whether someone's behavior remains reliable over time, not just when everything is going well. Healthy relationships are built through repeated actions, not occasional grand gestures. In dating, inconsistency often creates anxiety. One day, someone could be fully engaged, and the next, they're distant without explanation. They may express strong interest one week and disappear the next. That unpredictability keeps people questioning where they stand. And over time, it can become emotionally exhausting. So, emotional maturity values stability over emotional highs and lows. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. Nothing that I say on this show means perfection. Everyone has stressful weeks, busy schedules, and moments when life becomes overwhelming. What matters is that your overall behavior aligns with your words. Emotionally mature people make an effort to follow through and communicate when circumstances change and create an environment where trust can continue to grow. Boundaries, especially, are another essential part of emotional maturity. A boundary isn't about controlling someone else. It's about clearly communicating what you need to feel in order to feel respected and safe, or excuse me, what you need in order to feel respected, safe, and emotionally healthy. Emotionally mature people understand that every relationship benefits from boundaries because they create clarity instead of confusion. Rather than assuming someone just know, they communicate their expectations openly. Healthy boundaries can involve many different areas of a relationship, including time, communication, physical intimacy, finances, family, or emotional availability. They aren't meant to push people away, they're meant to help relationships function more honestly. When boundaries are discussed openly, both people have a better understanding of each other's needs and limitations. That clarity often prevents resentment from building over time. And perhaps most importantly, emotionally mature people don't punish others for setting boundaries. How many people have been there before? I certainly have felt like I was being punished for setting a boundary, and maybe you have as well. They may not always agree, but you have to respect that everyone has different capacities and comfort levels. So, an emotionally mature person is going to understand that hearing no doesn't automatically mean rejection. Respecting boundaries demonstrates emotional security because it allows both people to maintain their individuality while still building a healthy relationship together. Emotional availability is the willingness to be known. It means allowing another person to gradually see your thoughts, your feelings, your fears, your hopes and experiences instead of constantly keeping them at arm's length or at a distance. Emotional availability doesn't require sharing everything immediately, but it does require a willingness to let intimacy develop over time. Relationships can't deepen if one person is always emotionally guarded. Some people confuse emotional availability with constant vulnerability, but they're not the same thing. Healthy vulnerability happens gradually as trust develops, but emotionally available people know how to open up appropriately while also respecting the pace of the relationship. They don't avoid every meaningful conversation simply because vulnerability feels uncomfortable. You can have incredible chemistry with someone who isn't emotionally available. You can enjoy spending time together, feel attracted to one another, and even have really fun dates. But without emotional openness, that relationship often struggles to move beyond the surface. Lasting intimacy requires more than attraction. It requires two people who are willing to be emotionally present, communicate honestly, and allow themselves truly to be known. Conflict reveals emotional maturity faster than almost anything else in a relationship, unfortunately. Every couple will experience disagreements, misunderstandings, or moments of disappointment. The goal isn't to like eliminate conflict altogether. It's more so learning how to handle that conflict in a way that's going to strengthen the relationship instead of damaging it. Healthy conflict creates opportunities for understanding rather than opportunities to win. Emotionally immature conflict often looks like defensiveness, blame, criticism, stonewalling, or avoiding the conversation entirely. Instead of focusing on solving the problem together, both people become focused on protecting themselves or proving that they are right. Once the conversation becomes about winning, both people will usually end up losing because the relationship suffers. Emotionally mature people approach conflict differently. They ask questions. Ask those freaking questions. They ask questions before making assumptions. They listen without immediately preparing a rebuttal. And they're willing to repair when mistakes happen. They understand that healthy conflict isn't about proving who's right. It's about understanding each other well enough to move forward together with greater trust. Reciprocity is another important sign of emotional maturity. Healthy relationships aren't built by one person doing all the emotional work, while the other just simply benefits from it. Both people should contribute effort, communication, affection, curiosity, and support. While those contributions may not always be perfectly equal, which that in itself is understandable, they should at least generally feel balanced over time. Sometimes relationships become one-sided without either person realizing it. One person is always initiating conversation, making plans, checking in emotionally, or carrying the responsibility of keeping the relationship connected. Over time, that imbalance can lead to exhaustion, basically relationship burnout, and be, it, resentment because one person begins feeling like they're carrying the relationship alone. Now, an emotionally mature person is going to recognize and appreciate effort. They don't simply receive love, they actively participate in creating it. They understand that healthy relationships require ongoing investment from both people. They make a conscious effort to contribute rather than assuming the relationship will just maintain itself, which, if you've been watching my show for a while, you know that we kind of spoke a little bit about that within the last 3 or 4 weeks about feeling that one sidedness and maintaining the relationship alone. Self awareness continues to play a very important role throughout every stage of dating, because relationships have a way of revealing parts of ourselves that we may not notice otherwise. They can expose fears of rejection, abandonment, inadequacy, or vulnerability that may have been hidden for years. So, that emotional maturity means becoming curious about those patterns. So, looking within instead of pretending that they don't exist. A self aware person might recognize, am I becoming defensive because this reminds me of a previous relationship? Or am I realizing I tend to shut down whenever I feel criticized? That awareness creates an opportunity to respond differently instead of repeating the same behaviors over and over again. Growth begins with recognizing our own patterns before trying to change someone else's. Without self awareness, people often repeat the same relationship cycles while believing everyone else is the problem. They may continually choose emotional unavailable partners, avoid difficult conversations, or chase unhealthy dynamics without even realizing why. Emotional maturity encourages us to reflect honestly on our own behavior because lasting change always begins with ourselves. Emotional immaturity doesn't always appear dramatic. Sometimes it shows up through subtle behaviors like ghosting and mixed signals, or avoidance of difficult conversations, blaming everyone else, or refusing to take responsibility when conflict arises. These behaviors have become so common in modern dating, which is so freaking sad, that many people simply accept them as normal now, even though they often create confusion and emotional pain. It's also important to recognize that emotionally immature behavior doesn't automatically make someone a bad person. So let me at least put that disclaimer in there. Many people simply haven't developed healthier communication skills yet. They may avoid conversations because they fear confrontation, withdraw because vulnerability feels unsafe, or struggle with accountability because admitting mistakes feels overwhelming. Understanding that doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it can help us respond with greater clarity instead of personalizing everything. Ultimately, emotional maturity helps reduce unnecessary harm in relationships. It encourages people to communicate honestly, end relationships respectfully when it's necessary, and remember that every person they date deserves kindness and consideration. Dating becomes healthier when we stop treating people like temporary options and start recognizing the humanity behind every interaction. Secure relationship behaviors can sometimes feel unfamiliar, especially if someone has spent years in inconsistent or emotionally chaotic relationships. When you're used to that unpredictability, Stability may initially feel boring because your nervous system has become accustomed to the emotional highs and lows. But healthy relationships aren't supposed to feel like an emotional roller coaster, even if that has become the norm for most of us. They actually should instead create a sense of safety, consistency, and peace. Secure behaviors include honesty, reliability, emotional presence, accountability, and respectful communication. They create an environment where both people feel comfortable expressing themselves without constantly worrying about mixed signals or hidden agendas. Instead of wondering, where do they stand? Both partners have a clear understanding of the relationship because communication has been open and consistent. Many people say they want a healthy relationship, but they unintentionally chase excitement instead of security. Emotional maturity means learning to appreciate consistency instead of focusing on chaos. Chaos with chemistry. While healthy relationships may not always feel dramatic, they provide something far more valuable, and that's the freedom to build intimacy without constantly questioning whether or not the relationship is stable. So when you're choosing a partner, play pay close attention to behavior rather than promises. Anyone can say that they're emotionally mature, that they're ready for a commitment, or they're looking for a healthy relationship. That's all words. The real question is whether their actions consistently support those words. Emotional maturity isn't something people announce. It's something that they demonstrate over time. Look for someone who can apologize sincerely, someone who can communicate honestly, and remain respectful even during disagreement. Notice whether they follow through on commitments, respect your boundaries, and make an effort to understand your perspective instead of immediately becoming defensive. These behaviors may not seem as exciting as grand romantic gestures, but they're the qualities that create long term relationship stability. It's equally important to ask yourself those same questions. Are you communicating clearly? Are you taking accountability when you make mistakes? Are you choosing partners based solely on attraction? Are you also paying attention to emotional maturity? Healthy relationships require discernment from both people, and emotional growth is sometimes something we should continue developing throughout our lives. As we wrap up tonight's episode, I want to leave you with one important reminder. Emotional maturity is not about being perfect. Every single person will make mistakes, have emotional reactions, and experience moments where they wish they had handled something differently. That's always going to happen. What matters is your willingness to reflect, learn, repair, and continue growing. Growth is a lifelong process, and emotional maturity is measured by the choices that we make along the way. Throughout this month series, we've talked about so many things. We have talked about difficult conversations, emotional availability, validation, compatibility, and now emotional maturity. 5 weeks. So please go back and follow along with this series in June if you haven't already watched all of the episodes. But all of these topics are connected because healthy relationships aren't built on chemistry alone. And that was basically the point of June's series, right? They're built on communication, accountability, consistency, respect, and a willingness to keep showing up. Keep showing up for one another, even when relationships become challenging. Emotional